Security, remove him. The groom's voice sliced across the ballroom, sharp enough to still the string quartet mid-note. Marble underfoot, orchids trembling in the conditioned air, my daughter caught between us with wet eyes and a bouquet that shook. He mocked my $100 suit at my own daughter's wedding. The head of security approached, took in the room, and paused beside me. "Sir, we can't," he said quietly to the groom. "He's a VIP." The crowd froze. Forks hovered. Someone's shoe scuffed and then nothing, only the chandelier's soft tick as faces turned to whey cloth against character. He called security. Security called me VIP. 30 years on the bench taught me how people reveal themselves when they believe no one important is watching. Today, he revealed everything. I stood without moving, navy sleeve straight, invitation heavy in my pocket, feeling the small thud of my heart count the distance between arrogance and consequence. My daughter searched my face for heat. I gave her steadiness. Before dessert, the truth would be served. Not with shouting, not with spectacle, but with a clean line between respect and display. Masks were coming off, publicly and cleanly, and the room would learn what a suit can and cannot say. Humiliation, policy, reveal. A breath, a bass heartbeat through the floor, and the night opened like a file folder, ready for the record. Witnesses gathered, and justice took its quiet seat. Before we go further, tap subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever judged someone by what they wore and later realized you were wrong? Or maybe you've been judged, and you stayed silent until the truth finally spoke louder than appearances. Stay with me, because this story isn't about revenge or spectacle. It's about boundaries, character, and how dignity stands steady in a crowded room when arrogance tries to take center stage. Elden Mills is 65, a widower living in a modest Pasadena home that still carries his wife's quiet order. Margaret's roses climb the front rail, a living border between the street and a life built on careful choices. Most mornings begin the same way. One coffee cup set beside the ring dish at the sink. A brief walk to trim a stray stem, breathe the scent she loved, and listen to the soft clink of the cat's bell as it vanishes through the garden. Inside, shelves of law books line a study that smells faintly of lemon oil and paper, a room where decisions were weighed before they were spoken. His daughter, Kristen, inherited her mother's warmth and her father's discipline. She works in marketing, graceful under deadlines, skilled at translating nerves into poise. When she talks about her team, her eyes brighten in a way that still surprises him. She wants her worlds to blend, the quiet Pasadena house and the glossy spaces where she negotiates budgets and brand calendars. She wants him at dinners, at dress fittings, at moments that look like the start of a new family. On paper, nothing stands in the way. In practice, people do. Martin Hargrove arrives the way certain men always do, with a curated ease that asks to be admired. He is adjacent to power, raising funds, scouting founders, polishing slides for people whose wealth he covets by proximity. He translates value into presentation and treats presentation as destiny. To him, appearances are not introductions. They are verdicts. After 2 glasses of wine, the good humor cools to appraisal. That night at Kristen's table, he glances at Elden's navy jacket, the same suit Elden has worn at formal ceremonies and memorials, and decides the story he wants it to tell. He begins with a joke about thrift stores and finishes with advice about borrowing something better for the photographs. When the joke does not land, he expands his jurisdiction. He will pay for everything so standards are maintained. It sounds like generosity until you measure the direction of the leverage. A gift that arrives as a condition is not a gift. It is a leash. Kristen's jaw tightens, though she keeps moving dishes from counter to table. Elden studies the reflection in the window and holds his voice steady. No raised tone, no countersigned insult, only weathered patience. Elden has spent 30 years learning the discipline of silence. Silence gives space for the other person to declare their principles. Silence tells you who they are. He swallows the heat behind his ribs and answers evenly. The suit has served him well. Martin smiles wider and keeps winning imaginary points. He praises the hotel they have chosen, quotes what the photographers charge, reminds Kristen that the guest list will include people whose names mean leverage. He says he will shoulder all costs, so nothing embarrasses anyone. The sentence carries a hook that looks like care and feels like control. Kristen apologizes 3 times between clearing plates and asking about dessert. She knows her father's face well enough to see where tension hides. She also knows the request he always makes of friends and extended family. Keep my job out of the conversation. It is not secrecy from shame, but from distortion. Announcing authority changes how people behave. Elden learned that at barbecues when distant cousins held out parking tickets like favors. He learned it when acquaintances asked him to call a quiet friend at a precinct. If I announce power, I distort people. If I announce nothing, I see them. Morning brings the call. Saturday at 10:30, sunlight striping the desk. The phone rattles the calm. Martin begins with apology. He had too much wine. He values family. He respects Elden. The words sound right until they pivot into a directive. There is a men's shop on Wilshire that can solve the problem quickly. He can swing by, help with fit and palette, keep the wedding photographs aligned with expectations. The conversational mask slides into policy. When Elden declines, the voice hardens. Entry will be forbidden. He sets down the receiver and watches dust float through a bar of light across his blotter. Outside, a cat bell shakes once, then disappears through roses Margaret trained years ago. The scent reminds him that certain truths outlast insult. A $100 suit is not an insult. A $200,000 wedding is not a shield. He thinks of defendants who spoke kindly to juries and cruelly to clerks. He thinks of witnesses who smiled at cameras and sneered at waiters. 30 years on the bench taught him the difference between polish and character. Character endures when the room changes. He walks to the kitchen and rinses his cup, listening to the slow drip of the coffee maker settling. On the counter sits the old ring dish where Margaret left her band the night before chemo began. A small white oval with a hairline crack that never spread. Objects that carry meaning do not need a price tag. He holds the dish for a moment and hears the sentence form in his head. Silence protects. Proof anchors. He writes it on a small square of paper and tucks it into the top drawer of his desk. The stakes do not live in fabric or palette. They live in authorship. Who gets to write the story of this family? If a man can decide what a father wears to his own daughter's wedding, he can decide what belongs in the photographs and what does not. He can decide who is welcome and on what terms. If Elden yields, that story sets like concrete, and every holiday will bear its imprint. If he refuses with anger and no record, the fight becomes noise that splashes both households. He needs a third way, quiet and precise. He calls Kristen that afternoon to ask about cake flavors and seating charts. He does not tell her about the ultimatum. He will not place a weight on her that she did not choose. He asks if the florist remembered that her mother loved small garden roses more than long stems. She laughs, the sound he has waited weeks to hear. He tells her he will be on time to the rehearsal and that the Pasadena traffic is predictable if you leave before noon. She exhales and says, "Thank you," without saying for what. In the study, he opens the closet and checks the hanger. The navy suit looks exactly as it did in photographs, taken beside court seals and across conference tables. It fits because it was tailored, not because it was expensive. He runs a palm along the sleeve and considers what the fabric has witnessed. Sworn oaths, quiet settlements, long afternoons where a life turned because truth finally weighed more than performance. He closes the door and sits to think. Memory arranges itself in rows. He sees Margaret lifting her gardening gloves and tapping the porch rail with a twig to knock the dirt free. He sees Kristen in a homecoming dress, asking if the hem looks right as she twirls in the hall mirror. He sees a line of defendants, some frightened, some arrogant, all of them waiting to learn whether their stories hold. The pattern is simple. Fear pleads, arrogance explains, humility asks, and then listens. He breathes and writes the plan. Elden sat in his study long after the phone call ended, the words still echoing in the quiet house. Entry will be forbidden. He repeated them in his mind as if testing their weight. He had heard threats delivered with more venom in courtrooms, but rarely with such casual certainty. It was not the words alone, but the assumption behind them. The belief that money and image carried enough authority to dictate who could walk into his own daughter's wedding. Elden did not slam the phone down or pace the room. Instead, he reached for a pen and a yellow legal pad, the same tools he had used for decades to capture testimony. He wrote the phrase at the top of the page and underlined it twice. This was not noise to react to. This was evidence to document. He thought about Kristen and the smile she had carried through their last call. He could not give her this burden. Her day needed to be about vows and flowers, not ultimatums and control. If he told her what Martin had said, she would feel torn between loyalty to her father and loyalty to the man she believed she loved. That was not his place. His role was not to wound her before the day even began, but to protect her and let time do its work. He closed the pad, slid it into his desk drawer, and made a decision. He would meet arrogance on its own stage, but not by shouting or pleading. He would let it make its case and then reveal itself for what it was. The next week moved with deliberate precision. He opened his laptop and studied the hotel's website. Floor maps showed the layout of the Beverly Wilshire, the placement of the ballroom doors, the adjoining garden courtyard, the service corridors that discreetly carried staff and supplies. He printed the diagrams and circled entrances with a pen, noting likely paths for guests and points where security would stand. He read the hotel's published house rules, the policies that governed private events, the sections that outlined when management could intervene, and under what circumstances. He knew from long experience that institutions protected their own authority above all else. He did not need to call the hotel. He needed to learn it. Late one evening, he pinned the heavy invitation card to the corkboard above his desk. Its gold embossing glowed under the desk lamp, a daily reminder of what was at stake. Around it, he tacked his notes. Guest arrival times, security rotation estimates, even the direction of natural light through the ballroom windows. This was not obsession. It was preparation. Judges did not improvise when lives were at stake. They read the full record, studied precedents, and prepared for every question that might come. Martin wanted a scene. Elden prepared a mirror. There was one more matter to settle. He reached for the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. Justice Elena Vasquez answered on the second ring, her voice calm and familiar. They had shared benches, arguments, and late nights of deliberation. Elden did not tell her about Martin's ultimatum. He simply asked if she still planned to attend Kristen's ceremony. She confirmed she would, her tone warm with affection for his family. He thanked her and wished her a safe drive. Nothing more needed to be said. Her presence alone would be enough. Wardrobe became its own ritual. He pulled the navy suit from the closet and examined it under clear light. The fabric showed no wear, the seams were strong, and the fit remained exact. He ran a garment brush across the sleeves until the wool caught the light cleanly. He polished his shoes until they reflected the outline of the lamp above his desk. He tied his tie once, then untied it, then tied it again, not out of vanity, but to ensure the knot would sit without a wrinkle. Every detail mattered. Nothing sloppy could distract from the moral at stake. As the days narrowed, his mind settled into judicial rhythm. In court, he had often watched arrogance reveal itself. Defendants who believed wealth insulated them from consequence always pushed too far. They gave long answers when silence would have sufficed, explanations that exposed their motives. Elden never argued with arrogance. He let it speak until it convicted itself. Martin had already made his opening statement with the words, "Entry will be forbidden." Elden would let him continue until his own reflection undid him. The house ticked with ordinary sounds that week. The clock's second hand marked his evenings in the study. The printer fed sheets of hotel diagrams. A pen cap clicked against the desk as he considered where security might stand when called. Even the garden added its testimony. The bell of the neighbor's cat, the rustle of roses Margaret had planted, the evidence of patience and persistence in every bloom. All of it reminded him that dignity did not announce itself loudly. It prepared, it waited, and it stood steady when the test arrived. On Friday night, he pressed the suit one last time, folded a handkerchief, and placed it in the jacket pocket. He slipped the invitation into the same pocket, its edges firm against the fabric. He set his polished shoes beside the bed and laid out his shirt and tie on a chair. He checked the time of the ceremony once more and pinned a small note to his corkboard. Tomorrow, Kristen. He looked at the words until they blurred, then turned off the lamp. Saturday morning would arrive soon enough. The calendar on his desk already showed the date circled in red, the number standing out like a verdict waiting to be read. As he flipped the page to May, he paused. Justice was not about triumph or humiliation. It was about truth revealed when the world believed it was hidden. Martin had chosen his stage, but Elden had chosen his preparation. When the doors of the ballroom opened, he would not argue. He would not raise his voice. He would simply arrive, steady and silent, letting arrogance write its own record. Then he would wait for the moment when silence turned into proof. He closed the calendar with a steady hand. The decision was made. The Beverly Wilshire stood like a temple to grandeur, its marble facade glowing in the late afternoon light. Cars eased into the valet line in a steady procession of gleaming luxury. Sleek black sedans and polished European models rolled forward with the practiced choreography of wealth arriving to display itself. Elden's car, a modest sedan with years of faithful service, slipped into that line without apology. He handed the keys to a young valet who treated it with the same courtesy he had given the Bentley ahead. Money had its language, but professionalism had its own. Elden accepted the ticket, slipped it into his jacket pocket beside the heavy invitation, and entered through the grand doors. Inside, the lobby opened like a stage set for power. Crystal chandeliers scattered prisms across polished floors, and the air carried the faint scent of orchids and polished wood. Guests in gowns and tailored tuxedos moved in clusters, their voices confident, their laughter sharp with recognition. This was wealth's theater, where appearance was currency and every detail carried weight. Elden's navy suit did not attempt to compete. It simply existed, pressed, clean, and perfectly appropriate. He moved through the lobby without fanfare, his posture quiet but assured, as though he belonged here not because of what he wore, but because of who he was. The first sight of his daughter nearly broke his composure. Kristen stood near the altar, surrounded by a sea of white orchids that spilled like waterfalls from tall vases. Her gown flowed in ivory silk, light catching each fold until she seemed to glow. For a moment, Margaret's memory surged so strongly that Elden had to pause. The tilt of Kristen's smile, the warmth in her eyes. It was her mother's presence, alive again in their daughter. Kristen spotted him, her face brightening with relief and joy. She crossed the short distance carefully, her gown trailing like mist. "You look perfect," Elden said, his voice steady though his throat tightened. "So do you, Dad," she answered, her hand resting lightly on his arm. It was not a judgment on fabric or cost, but a daughter's affirmation, the bond between them visible in the way her shoulders eased when he arrived. For that instant, the chaos of planning and the shadow of tension faded. It was only father and daughter, holding each other in the middle of a grand ballroom. Two lives connected by love, stronger than circumstance. But perfection never lasted long in Martin Hargrove's world. The groom appeared from the far side of the room, his stride smooth, his tuxedo cut to perfection, every movement calculated to command attention. His eyes locked on Elden like lasers, narrowing as they scanned the suit he had already condemned. He drew closer, his smile polished for guests, but his voice pitched low for Elden alone. "We had an understanding," Martin hissed, his words slicing through the warm moment like a cold blade. Elden met his gaze calmly. "Let her day be clean," he said, keeping his tone quiet, steady, and free of heat. "Don't spoil it with this." But Martin thrived on stages, and an audience was too tempting to resist. He straightened his shoulders, turned slightly so nearby guests could hear, and let his voice rise. "Apparently, some people don't understand what appropriate attire means at a $200,000 wedding." His words were loud enough that a few conversations nearby faltered, heads turning with the instinctive curiosity of crowds sensing conflict. Kristen's eyes darted between them, confusion and panic flickering across her face. She opened her mouth, but Martin pressed forward, now savoring the attention. "We discussed this, Elden. You chose to ignore me. There will be consequences." The string quartet stumbled mid-phrase, bows halting in mid-air as the dissonance spread. Conversations dimmed, the hum of voices replaced by a rising hush. The chandeliers seemed to tick as their crystal prisms swayed slightly. Even the air system's steady whisper filled the silence more than usual. The grandeur of the ballroom now held its breath. Martin turned, his gesture imperious. "Security! Remove him!" he commanded, his voice slicing across the marble space. From the back of the room, Victor Reyes, head of hotel security, began his approach. His dark suit and discreet earpiece marked him as a professional whose presence reassured wealthy guests. He walked with measured calm, his expression neutral but observant. Each step drew more attention, the circle of watching guests widening. A cue card on the music stand still read, "Processional 6 p.m." A clock near the far wall ticked 5:54. Time itself seemed to pause, waiting. Victor reached them, his posture firm but respectful. He looked first at Martin, who gestured sharply at Elden with visible impatience. This man was told not to attend in that suit. He disregarded clear instructions. "Remove him." Victor's eyes moved to Elden, scanning him the way professionals did. Attire, demeanor, the invitation card visible in his breast pocket. Something subtle shifted in his expression, a recognition held carefully behind professionalism. He leaned closer, his voice pitched low but audible enough for those nearest to hear. "Sir, we cannot," Victor said, his tone steady. Martin blinked, thrown off balance. "What do you mean you cannot? I am the client. I am paying for this event." Victor did not flinch. "He is a VIP." The word cut the room in half. Guests exchanged glances, murmurs rippling like a wave through the gathered crowd. "VIP?" someone whispered, the question carrying across the hush. The string quartet had lowered their bows entirely, frozen like statues. Kristen's hand clutched the silk of her gown. Her breath caught. Elden stood calm in the center of the storm, his face steady, his shoulders square, his eyes fixed not on Martin's anger, but on his daughter's trembling hope. The room's silence pressed in, waiting for what would come next. The ripples of shock spread outward, growing wider with each heartbeat. All eyes fixed on Elden, but his calm never wavered. The marble floors reflected the tension like mirrors. Crystal chandeliers held prisms of frozen light. The orchids seemed almost to lean toward the center, as though the flowers themselves wanted to hear the verdict forming in the air. And through it all, Elden remained exactly as he had planned, silent, prepared, and unshaken. The scene Martin had demanded was no longer his to control. It had become something else entirely. The camera would have pushed in then, a slow focus on Elden's face, the quiet dignity set against the noise of wealth and panic. His eyes did not seek triumph or revenge. They carried something deeper, something steadier. 30 years on the bench had taught him not to rush. He simply let arrogance write its record, word by word, action by action, until the truth could no longer be denied. The hush deepened. The moment hung. Transition waited, steady as breath, carrying them all toward what would follow. Victor did not blink after the word VIP settled over the room. He adjusted his stance by a fraction and kept his voice level. "Sir, I work for the hotel, not for individual guests. Our duty is to protect all patrons and the integrity of the event. That includes honoring our VIP list." "I am the client," Martin snapped. "This is my wedding, my rules." "You are an honored host," Victor replied, "and the hotel appreciates your business. But my responsibility includes safety, decorum, and policy. If there is a dispute, we relocate it. We do not escalate it in the aisle." Kristen looked between them, breath shallow. "Dad, what is happening?" Elden angled toward her, voice even. "Focus on her. Breathe. Your day first." Martin leaned in as if proximity could overwhelm policy. He pointed at Elden's navy sleeve. "I gave him instructions. He ignored them. He is not walking into my photographs dressed like that. You will remove him." Victor's radio hand rose to his earpiece while his other hand stayed open at his side. "Copy," he murmured, and two attendants at the far doors shifted into alert readiness. "Sir, we do not remove VIPs for attire that meets venue standards. If an issue remains, we handle it away from the ceremony space." The room created a ring without being told. Guests formed a soft perimeter. The string quartet rested their bows. The ballroom became a theater. "You cannot simply declare him untouchable," Martin said. "I am paying $200,000. I own this room today." "You have reserved the room and the services, sir," Victor said. "The hotel owns the rules. Status bought the ball. It does not buy the rules." A ripple ran through the crowd, a chandelier. Prism clicked like a clock hand. Kristen took a step toward Martin. "Please, stop. We can talk later." "Later is not an option," Martin shot back. "If you will not remove him, I will have you replaced. Call your manager. Call whoever you need now." "Already notified, sir," Victor said calmly. "My manager is aware. His instruction is to proceed with ceremony protocol and to move any dispute to the garden." "I will sue this hotel," Martin said, louder now, drawing more eyes and tilted phones. "I will sue the chain. I will sue you. You are interfering with a private event." "We are preserving a private event," Victor replied. "Step with me to the courtyard to continue this conversation." Elden kept his hands loosely folded. He gave Kristen the smallest nod, and she latched onto the signal. "Dad, are you leaving?" she whispered. "Not for his demand," Elden said. "For your peace. If I move, it is to make room for your vows." Martin spread his arms at the crowd. "Does everyone see this?" He turned back to Victor. "You will be disciplined for this." "There are procedures for complaints," Victor answered. "We will follow them after the ceremony. Right now, we follow safety and decorum, Section 4 of our event policy. Sir, step with me." Victor's hand did not touch Martin. It hovered near his elbow with professional distance. Two staffers appeared on cue, one by the doors, one near the aisle. A path opened. The fountain in the courtyard beyond threw a veil of sound into the doorway. Kristen's fingers trembled against her gown. "Elden, please," she said softly. "Look at me," he said gently. "The room is loud, but the vows are louder. Hold to that." Martin stepped toward Victor, chin lifted. "You are making a mistake. I know owners, donors, committee chairs. Your job depends on their goodwill. Move him, or I will have your badge by Monday." My job depends on protocol, Victor answered, and on doing the right thing when it is hardest. A few guests let out a soft murmur. A server quietly capped a champagne bottle. Fine, Martin said. We go to the garden. But he does not enter this room. He jabbed a finger toward Elden. We will speak in the courtyard, Victor said. The ceremony will proceed on schedule. Sir, with me. They moved through the doors with a soft wave of observers through the hall. Radios clicked. The air in the courtyard was cooler, the sky open between hotel wings. The circle widened in the garden, guests forming an oval. This hotel will regret this, Martin said. You will refund every dollar. You will issue a written apology, and you will permanently ban that man from your property. Victor stood by the fountain's rim. Sir, you are agitated. If you continue to disturb your guests, we will suspend alcohol service and pause the event until the host regains composure. That is also policy. You threaten me on my wedding day, Martin said. I am offering you a choice, Victor said. Calm and proceed, or escalate and pause. My recommendation is calm. Elden remained just inside the doorway, with Kristen. He looked at the fountain and at his daughter's profile catching light. Quiet is a tool, he thought. Use it. Kristen turned toward him. Dad, why would he do this? Because some people only understand mirrors when a crowd is present, Elden said. Because they mistake attention for authority, and because they do not know the difference between respect and display. If he is a VIP, show me the list, Martin said. Prove it. We do not disclose client data, Victor said. If you need assurance, speak with my manager after the ceremony. For now, your guests are waiting. The quartet is waiting. Your bride is waiting. A beat passed. Fine, Martin said, though the words sounded like gravel. We proceed. But I will file complaints. I will call the owner. I will make sure you feel this. Noted, Victor replied. Shall I escort you to your position, or would you like a moment to compose yourself? A few in the crowd lowered their eyes. The fountain kept talking. Compose, Martin said. Make sure he stays far from the aisle. The aisle belongs to the ceremony, Victor said. Everyone else belongs to their choices. He stepped aside, offering a clear path to return, unhurrying and firm. Elden straightened his jacket and looked at Kristen again. She had found her breath. She had found her spine. A tiny nod passed between them, invisible to most. As the crowd drifted back, Victor walked at an angle that protected sightlines and dignity. Staff gave tiny nods to one another. In the ballroom, a server reset 2 chairs. The quartet leader lifted a bow. At the threshold, Victor spoke softly, so only Martin and the nearest guests could hear. Remember, sir, status bought the ball. It does not buy the rules. Martin did not answer. He walked past the threshold, seeing eyes that were not applauding. The reversal had already happened, and not a dollar had moved. Only the weight of rules had. Elden and Kristen followed, slow and centered. The marble felt cooler now. The air inside seemed lighter. The ring of guests thinned into aisles. Victor nodded once to the quartet. Bows rose slowly. The first sustained note settled over the room like a promise kept, steady and clear. And in that hush, Elden thought a single line he might share when the time was right. You do not argue with arrogance. You let it make its case. Then policy writes the verdict. The courtyard air held a tight hush, broken only by the fountain's steady breath. Martin's voice ripped through it. I will sue all of you. The hotel, the security company, every last person who thinks they can treat me like this, starting with that man in the bargain suit. He slashed a hand toward Elden, spit bright in the sunlight. A firm voice answered, clear enough to cut marble. Let us see you try suing the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. Heads pivoted. The circle parted. Justice Elena Vasquez stepped forward from the row of white garden chairs, silver hair catching a flash of sun, posture relaxed but unarguable. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. One glass clinked on a tray, and then silence sealed itself over the courtyard. Elena's eyes moved from Victor Reyes to Kristen, then landed on Martin with professional composure. You are threatening litigation against hotel staff for following policy, against security for de-escalating, and against a guest you attempted to remove over clothing. She turned her palm, indicating Elden with a small, respectful gesture. That guest is Judge Elden Mills, Chief Justice of this state's highest court. Wise, fair, incorruptible. Gasps stitched a seam around the crowd. A table near the garden doors held place cards. One read E. Vasquez, J. The serif J. Quiet and devastating. Martin's face drained to ash. The math moved across his expression in real time. Arrogance minus facts, multiplied by audience, equaling a very public deficit. Elden did not move. He stood with his hands loosely folded, gaze steady on his daughter. Kristen's breath hitched. Her eyes searched his face with a new understanding that widened and steadied at once. The man who raised her had asked to keep his title away from family politics. Now the title arrived without fanfare, like a document filed on time. Martin tried to assemble a new tone, the swagger cracked and leaking. I did not know, he started, but the excuse sounded small in the courtyard air. His eyes bounced from Elena to Victor, then to Elden's navy sleeve, as if the fabric could be reinterpreted by rank. Elena did not gloat. She addressed Victor first. Mr. Reyes, you handled this properly. Policy in public venues protects the vulnerable and the powerful the same way. The law respects good process. Thank you, Justice, Victor said, posture unchanged, voice even. Elena faced the circle. People reveal themselves when they believe there is no consequence. Today, many of you witnessed how quickly contempt can climb the ladder of volume. She nodded once, letting the lesson rest with them rather than pushing it into them. Martin swallowed. Your Honor, he said to Elden, reaching for a lifeline he had not earned. I would never have spoken that way had I known. That is the problem, Elena said, not unkindly. The knowledge should not change your treatment of anyone. Elden lifted a hand slightly, not to claim the floor, just to relieve its weight. The suit was never the issue. His voice was measured, the cadence of someone who has read 1,000 verdicts and still believes words can straighten spines. What matters is how we treat each other without a spotlight or a resume. A server near the arch exhaled audibly. The crowd shifted closer by inches. Elden looked to Kristen first. Your day matters. Your vows matter. If this ends now, it ends because you deserve a ceremony clean of spectacle. She nodded, lips pressed together, tears bright, but not falling. Martin took half a step forward, hands open. I am sorry, he said quickly. I had too much champagne. I was stressed. I wanted everything perfect. I said things I did not mean. I misspoke. No, Elena said gently. You spoke clearly. You meant every word until the audience changed. The rustle of fabric, a throat cleared, the fountain counting seconds. Elden's voice returned, calm as cool water. I wore this suit to remind myself that dignity is a posture, not a purchase. I kept my work private because titles distort behavior. If I announce power, I distort people. If I announce nothing, I see them. Kristen's hand found the skirt seam of her dress and stilled there. She looked at Martin, then back to her father. Dad, she said softly, please say what you need to say. Elden nodded once. I will be brief. He turned slightly, addressing the courtyard without sermon or sting. There is a difference between standards and vanity, between stewardship and control, between hospitality and humiliation. When we confuse them, we weaponize occasions that should be sacred. Martin opened his mouth, then closed it. The words had nowhere honorable to land. Victor's radio crackled once as staff inside reset chairs. The quartet's leader waited at the threshold, bow resting light against strings. Elena glanced toward the garden doors, then back at Elden. "If you wish, Chief Justice, ceremony can proceed. I will speak with management to ensure staff are supported for following policy." Elden inclined his head in appreciation and looked to Kristen again. "You decide. We can pause. We can begin. We can move this under a different sky." She drew a breath and found her center. "We begin," she said. "But first I need clarity." She turned to Martin. His eyes were wet now, less from remorse than from the collapse of certainty. Kristen's tone stayed gentle, not fragile. "You told my father he would be barred from my wedding for wearing a suit he has worn proudly for years. You called security to remove him. You threatened lawsuits. That is not stress speaking. That is belief speaking." Martin's mouth trembled. "I can change." "Change begins with truth," Elena said. "A witness for wisdom, not a judge over it." Elden did not add weight. He removed it. "Kristen, start your life by setting a boundary you can keep." Kristen nodded again, the movement more certain. "Martin, you will apologize now to my father, to Mr. Reyes, and to the staff you tried to intimidate. Then you will apologize to our guests for turning this into a spectacle. After that, we will decide privately whether vows make sense today." A hush deeper than the earlier silence settled. This was not punishment. It was order. Martin swallowed hard and turned to Victor. "Mr. Reyes, I am sorry. I disrespected your position and your policies. You did your job with professionalism." "Thank you, sir," Victor said, not stepping closer, not stepping back. Martin faced the servers by the arch. "I am sorry to the staff. I spoke as if money replaced manners. It does not." Several nodded, surprised but steady. Finally, Martin faced Elden. "Your Honor? Judge Mills? I apologize. I judged you by cost instead of character. I treated your dignity like an obstacle. I was wrong." Elden received the words without ceremony. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "Forgiveness takes longer than words, but words can begin it." He turned to the guests. "Thank you for your patience. Remember this instead of the scene. A room chose policy over pressure, and it held." A soft wave of breath moved through the gathering like a sail catching wind. Elena stepped aside, clearing the line of sight to the garden doors. Elden looked to the quartet and made a small motion with 2 fingers. The leader inclined his head. Bows rose. A tone bloomed, warm and unbroken, threading the courtyard back to the ballroom. Kristen slipped her arm through her father's. Her voice was barely above the fountain. "Walk me to the door. Not the aisle yet, just the door." They took 3 slow steps together. At the threshold, Elden paused. He glanced once at Martin, not cruelly. Then he spoke for the room, for the record, for the lesson. The suit was never the issue. Character always is. He placed Kristen's hand on the doorframe as if placing a bookmark in a story still being written. Elena gave a small nod, proud and private. Victor signaled discreetly to staff. The path inside was clear, the cord sustained. Elden released his daughter's hand and stepped to the side, not out, but aside, making space for her choice. Kristen looked into the ballroom's soft light, then over her shoulder at the circle that had witnessed everything. Her chin lifted. The reveal was complete without spectacle. Names had weight. Policy had spine. Dignity stood where it began, in a navy sleeve on a steady arm, under a sky that did not choose sides, only truth. The courtyard held a measured silence. The fountain kept time. Leaves stirred above the guests as Elden stepped forward, not to perform, but to speak like a man who had spent his life listening for what is true. He glanced at Kristen's bouquet, trembling from the shock, then lifted his eyes to the ring of faces. 30 years, he began. I have watched people show themselves when they believed no one important was watching. I have heard a voice change for a valet, a waiter, a clerk behind a counter, a nurse on the night shift. I have watched smiles narrow when a tip was delayed and eyes harden when a request was refused. I have watched wealth confuse itself for wisdom, and I have watched modest people become giants because they chose respect when no one ordered them to. Wind moved through the palms, scattering light across tuxedos and silk. Money buys venue. It cannot buy virtue. Contracts can rent a room. They cannot lease a conscience. If you anchor worth to price, you become a creditor of the soul, always collecting, never giving. Sooner or later, the account runs out. He looked to the staff at the edges. Every person working today carries more than a tray or a radio. Each carries a life. Some left children with neighbors. To make this shift, some are paying tuition. Some are sending half a paycheck to parents who kept a roof intact. If your voice grows sharp with them when an order delays, if your face tightens when a policy is explained, nothing about your education, fund, or title redeems that moment. He turned back to the guests. I wore a navy suit my wife liked because dignity is a posture, not a purchase. I kept my work quiet because titles bend behavior. When you declare power first, you invite performance. When you say nothing, you invite truth. Today, truth arrived. Kristen's tears softened into something steadier. She held her bouquet closer. Elena Vasquez gave a small nod. At the perimeter, Victor Reyes motioned to his team. The tight ring eased into a respectful arc. Price's worth is a dangerous arithmetic, Elden continued. It says a suit with fewer zeros lowers a man. It says a dress with more zeros raises a woman. It says a chair at a table confers character. It says a check proves love. Believe that math, and you will grade humans like invoices. You will call control generosity and humiliation stewardship. You will make a public day small. We are all vulnerable to this, he said. Status is loud. It sells certainty. It praises obedience and punishes questions. It is easy to outsource judgment to price tags and call it taste. Harder to stand in a room and remember the janitor's first name. I am not here to scold, Elden said. I am here to lift something simple. Respect is not a line item. It is a habit. It shows up in small choices. Do you lower your voice when someone lacks leverage? Do you say please to those who cannot retaliate? Do you apologize without a comma that explains it away? Practice that in private, and public moments will not expose you. They will confirm you. He looked toward Martin without staring him down. Some of us learn this later than we should. Learning late is not a crime. Refusing to learn is. If today is the first day you notice your own tone, then today is a good day. Begin. This day is for vows, not verdicts, Elden said. But there is a decision to make. Will we treat this crisis as a costume change and rush back on stage, or will we let it shape the script? The easy path is to pretend the insult was wine and nerves. The honest path is to see the belief beneath it. Beliefs are what we marry into. For those who lead companies, your culture is what you tolerate. Values can live on a wall, but the truest value lives in how your most powerful person speaks to your least defended person when outcomes are uncertain. If you reward results earned with contempt, you are buying decay. If you reward patience, candor, and humility, you are compounding trust. He returned to first things. I have sat with families when apologies were late and when apologies were early. Early is better. It does not erase harm, but it changes what happens next. Martin, he said, turning fully now, start with a sincere apology to Kristen. Then step back and let her decide what to do with the day. That is my verdict. Not a sentence, a boundary. Martin swallowed. The apology had begun once, but now the instruction placed it where it belonged. For the rest of us, choose useful memory, Elden added. Do not tell this as the day a man in a cheap suit won an argument. Tell it as the day a room chose policy over pressure and remembered that rules protect everyone when we honor them, without checking who is in the spotlight. If these words find you later, when no one is watching, use them then. When you are tired in an airport and the agent cannot move you up, when your server forgets a side dish, when a nurse asks you to wait. Your reaction is your resume. Your habit becomes your legacy. He set the microphone on the stand. For a second, the courtyard held its breath. Then Elena's hands began to come together, crisp and clean, and others joined her. First a row of attorneys, then executives who had been studying him like a case study, then younger guests who lowered their phones to listen with full faces. The applause grew, a sound that felt less like triumph than relief. Kristen's tears lifted from grief and settled into pride. She pressed her bouquet to her chest, shoulders squared, chin steady, eyes on her father with gratitude and resolve braided together. Victor's team eased the perimeter. The semicircle opened into a path. Servers resumed their routes with careful grace. Elden stepped back into the shadow of an arch, giving Kristen the foreground. He had said what mattered. The applause receded like tide. In the quiet that followed, he spoke once more, not to command, only to set the next step clear. This is your day, Kristen. Whatever you choose, we will honor it. If you want quiet, we will give you quiet. If you want time, we will make time. If you want the aisle, we will walk. Kristen drew a long breath and looked at Martin. His eyes were rimmed with shock, but defiance had dimmed. She shifted her bouquet and nodded. Martin, please. Martin faced her, voice low. I am sorry, Kristen. I humiliated your father, and I humiliated you. I confused control for care. I confused expense for love. I will accept whatever you decide. I will not argue. I will not plead. I will honor it. She absorbed that without flinching, then looked to Elden. He gave only a patient face, the one he had worn when she was small and arguing about shoes, the one he had worn when grief came like weather. She turned back to the courtyard and spoke where all could hear. We will take 10 minutes. I want to speak with my father and with Justice Vasquez. Please give us that pause. Then I will tell you what happens next. A hush returned, not tense but attentive. The quartet leader lifted his bow and let a single note hang like a gentle curtain, an intermission rather than an ending. Elden inclined his head to the guests. He stepped to Kristen's side. Elena joined them, offering a quiet clasp of Kristen's forearm. Victor signaled to hold the doors and keep the path clear but unobtrusive. They moved toward a pocket of shade. Behind them, conversation rose softly, as if the room had learned the difference between volume and importance. Elden did not look back. The habit he had asked for was already alive in the space they left. A quieter tone, a longer patience, a gentler posture. For the first time since the insult in the dining room, the day felt like it belonged to vows again. The fountain kept time while orchids breathed quietly from the hall, and hope returned softly. The courtyard fell quiet except for the fountain. Kristen stood between her father and Justice Elena Vasquez, bouquet lowered, chin steady. Martin waited a few steps away, hands open, eyes pleading. Elden let silence give his daughter room. Victor Reyes and 2 attendants paused by the doors at a respectful distance. Martin spoke first. I am sorry, Kristen. I said cruel things. I tried to control your father and your day. I confused prestige with love and money with care. I will accept your decision, and I will not argue. His words were frayed, but plain. Kristen breathed once, then faced him. I hear your apology. I believe you regret what you did. But I need more than regret. Love is not a power play. If we walked down that aisle now, we would be blessing the behavior that tried to shape us by shame. We will not marry today. Guests shifted. The quartet steadied into a warm progression. Some faces showed shock. Others softened with relief. Many simply breathed at last. Elden's voice came gently. Clarity is mercy sooner. You have chosen clearly. Elena nodded. You have the right to protect your vows by not speaking them under pressure. Martin swallowed. His posture shrank from command to listening. I understand. I will leave so you can breathe. Thank you for not making this harder, Kristen said. We will speak later, not today. Victor inclined his head toward Martin. Sir, I can escort you to the front or to a private exit if you prefer. Martin glanced at the circle of witnesses, at the path that had once felt like a stage. Private, please, he said. Victor gestured, and they moved with quiet efficiency toward the service corridor. No one jeered. The ballroom did not need a villain. It needed air. Elden turned to Kristen. I have spoken with the hotel. They can reposition the smaller salon by the windows for a private family dinner. No speeches, no cameras, no program. Just a table, some quiet food, and the people who know how to be still with you. Kristen blinked, and the hard shimmer behind her eyes softened. That sounds like oxygen. Elena touched the bouquet stem. I will call the clerk and ensure any legal paperwork is paused. Nothing moves without your signature. Staff began to work quickly. An attendant flipped a brass sign from ceremony to private reception. A manager in a dark suit approached Elden with a short bow. Judge Mills, we can reset the West Salon within 15 minutes. We will station staff at the doors to redirect guests with courtesy. Thank you, Elden said. Please make sure anyone who wishes to leave can do so easily. Of course, the manager replied. This is about comfort, not optics. Word traveled by calm instruction. Ushers explained that the ceremony would not proceed and that the family would gather privately to breathe. Some guests slipped toward the elevators, grateful for release. Others murmured that integrity had just happened and chose to remain for the gentler evening. Kristen and Elden stood together while the room adjusted. She leaned a shoulder against him like she had when she was small. Dad, she said quietly, thank you for not letting me rush back on stage. You made the choice, he answered. I only cleared the hallway. The quartet held to a low hymn of strings. Servers carried orchids from the altar to the sideboard, where they could soften a new space without asking anyone to pretend. Aunt Lydia arrived with a shawl and wrapped it around Kristen's shoulders. Proud of you, Bird, she said. Hard decisions are still gifts when they arrive early. Guests continued to pass into the West Salon, where the staff had set round tables with plain linens and white plates. No menu cards, no tall arrangements to block faces, only water, bread, and a promise of soup and simple roast chicken. Elden watched the pivot with gratitude. The hotel was doing more than service. It was performing quiet mercy. Kristen took Elena's hand. Will you sit with us tonight? Elena smiled. I will sit, and I will be quiet until asked. Martin's absence registered only as the space where noise had been. A few of his friends hovered near the exit, their faces troubled. One approached Elden. Sir, I came to celebrate. I did not come for a lesson, but I received one I needed. Thank you. He extended his card without insistence. Elden accepted the card, not as currency, but as a testimony. Learn well, he said. Practice is the proof. Kristen turned to the room. Friends, thank you for your grace. We will not marry today. We will share a meal instead. If you wish to bless us, do it by telling the truth at your own tables tonight, to the people who serve you and to the people you love. We will be all right. A soft murmur moved through the guests like approval from a quiet jury. The light outside began to change. Elden offered his arm. Shall we walk to the salon? Just you and me for the first 30 steps. She nodded. Those 30 steps felt like a ceremony of their own. At the door of the West Salon, the manager held it open as if it were a chapel. Inside, the smaller room held a long table by the windows. Plates waited. Candles flickered low. Family gathered without choreography. Elden pulled out a chair for Kristen. When they sat, he did not raise a glass. Conversation started on its own. Someone asked about the day she chose her dress. Someone else told a short story about Margaret teaching a child to tie shoes. Laughter came back slowly, not loud, but honest. A server set a bowl of soup in front of Kristen. She lifted the spoon and paused. "To today's mercy," she said softly. "To early clarity." Elden met her eyes across the table and offered one last line. "Clarity is mercy sooner." She smiled, and for the first time since the strings had stopped, she tasted something that did not carry the flavor of disappointment. Outside, the city lit its evening. Inside, warm strings drifted from the corridor as the hotel closed the ballroom and dimmed its chandeliers. The sign at the threshold read, "Private Reception." The night would belong to conversation and to the kind of peace that follows a hard, clean choice. The story would move on from here, not on a timetable anyone could buy, but at the speed of growth, which is faithfully and slow. If this moment gave you clarity, hit like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever watched someone's mask fall in public? What did you do next? Your stories help others set their boundaries today. And if you are new here, welcome. This is where dignity doesn't shout. It simply stands, steady and unshaken. Elden sat at his kitchen table with the evening pressed close to the windows. He drew a sheet of heavy paper from the drawer with stamps and Margaret's old address labels, uncapped his fountain pen, and wrote his daughter's name. He kept the tone steady, the way he kept courtrooms steady. "Kristen, I'm proud of how you stood in a hard moment. What happened in the courtyard was public, but the work ahead is private. I'm not writing to tell you what to do. I'm setting down what I saw over time, so you can choose without fog. People show patterns when they believe no one is measuring them. Last night revealed a pattern, not a mistake. Pressure didn't invent it. Pressure unmasked it." He wrote about posture, about how contempt arrives dressed as advice, how control calls itself generosity, how an apology turns into a directive when an audience appears. He noted the dinner where a price tag became a verdict. He noted the morning call where regret pivoted into rules. He noted the ballroom where image tried to outrun character and lost. Thank you for choosing clarity over momentum. Love is not a power play. If a person cannot protect your dignity in a crowd, they will not protect your peace in a kitchen. Your future does not need spectators. I will not speak about this beyond what the day required. No interviews, no posts. When people ask, I will say, the two of you are taking time to think. You don't have to manage their curiosity. If he seeks help honestly, and if change shows up as consistent behavior across a calendar, that is a different conversation. Change is not a speech. It is a practice. Only you decide your threshold. You keep the gate to your own life. He closed with the sentence that had settled in him while he walked the garden after midnight. Leverage ends where clarity begins. Call me when you want breakfast. I'll make the coffee. He, Miitini, folded the letter and sealed it in the matching envelope, writing her address in the same hand that had signed opinions for 3 decades, as a father steadying. A second note came next, short and professional, addressed to Martin, by name and date. Yesterday's conduct displayed a pattern you alone must address. Seek counseling with a licensed professional. Repair your lens before attempting to build a life with anyone. Do not contact me directly. Any necessary logistics can go through Kristen's counsel or the hotel coordinator. I wish you the discipline true repair requires. He signed it without flourish and set it with the first. He carried both to the porch and slipped them into the mailbox. Back inside, the house returned to small sounds. He turned off the lamp and let quiet take the room. Earlier that night, after the guests dispersed, Victor Reyes found him near the service corridor where orchids were misted. "Mr. Mills, thank you for your calm. We have procedures for 100 kinds of conflict, but composure like yours makes all of them easier." Elden nodded. You protected the venue and the guests without spectacle. That matters. We protect all guests, Victor said. Policy is the boundary no check can move. Elena joined them, silver hair bright under the work lights. Your team handled a delicate moment with restraint, she told Victor, offering her card in case a report needed an external line. Our goal is constant. People first, reputations second. Elden thanked them while staff reset chairs. The hotel kept its word. Near dawn, a slim envelope slid under Kristen's temporary suite door. Inside was a single page on letterhead, a courtesy reallocation of space and staff, a waiver of fees during the affected hours, and a line that read, "We respect your privacy. No employee is authorized to discuss tonight's events." A catering card was clipped to it with a handwritten note, "We will move tables at your pace." Elden sent a concise email to the general manager documenting the exchange and thanking the team for discretion. He printed a copy and slipped it into a plain folder labeled Kristen, Wedding. Not for leverage or ammunition, but to close the loop on process. Good systems left clean trails. He added one more note to himself, dated and clipped inside his planner. Do not rehearse humiliation. Do not collect enemies. Protect the quiet. When people ask, say she is steady, and she is choosing. He set the planner beside a photograph of Margaret in the garden. By afternoon, a florist arrived with leftover centerpieces, white roses and fern in glass cylinders, and 2 bakery boxes holding the smallest version of the cake Kristen had chosen. No invoice, only a sticky note from the pastry chef, for the people who showed up with grace. Elden arranged the flowers and placed the note in the folder. He turned off the television when a local station teased a segment about a scene at a high-end wedding. No statements, no corrections, no indignation. Silence is selection. He sent one text to a mutual friend who had asked for comment. Please give Kristen space. She'll speak for herself when she's ready. Thank you. Near dusk, the mail clattered through the slot. Among the envelopes lay a card in Kristen's quick hand with a simple K embossed at the top. Thank you for writing what you saw without anger. I'm reading it slowly. Breakfast soon. The sentence steadied him. He walked the garden with pruning shears, clipping spent blooms. Boundaries, he thought, were trellises, not walls. Structures that let vines rise without tangling into themselves. Leverage was weight. Clarity was morning light. He set 2 place settings while the kettle whispered, put the folder away, and wiped the surface clean. Whatever came next would come deliberately. There would be no victory lap and no saved bitterness. If counsel was requested, he would give it. If silence was chosen, he would honor it. Before bed, he stood at the window and watched the street settle. A bicyclist drifted by. A neighbor turned off a porch lamp. Somewhere, a dog barked once and stopped. On the desk, the fountain pen rested with its cap snug. On the counter, 2 stamped envelopes waited for morning pickup. One to his daughter across town, one to a man who would either change or repeat. He rinsed a glass, turned off the light, and let the house breathe. Dawn would arrive on schedule, and with it the ordinary mercy of routine in a city that forgets and forgives at the same time. Pasadena would be quiet, the kind that lets choices take shape without an audience. In that quiet, letters travel, minds clear, and futures take the first honest step. Later that evening, Elena sent a brief follow-up email to both men, a model of clean process. She summarized the sequence, thanked the hotel for honoring policy, and noted that no record beyond incident logs was needed. Elden replied with a single line of appreciation and a request for continued discretion. Victor answered with a promise the team could keep. Staff had been briefed not to discuss the event and would decline inquiries. No one would post. No one would leak. Privacy was the victory the day deserved. Elden set the paint can on a drop cloth and tightened the porch rail one careful screw at a time. The wood gave a tired creak, then settled the way an old friend settles after being heard. He sanded splinters until the grain ran smooth beneath his palm, wiped the dust with a rag, and brushed on a thin coat that matched the trim Margaret chose years ago. Sun reached through the sycamores and warmed the new gloss. Down the street, a church bell tested the hour with one soft note. The house felt honest again. Sunday put him at the diner 2 blocks from the courthouse. The waitress with the braid paused at his booth and smiled like a habit. 2 coffees and a side of jam, like Margaret used to ask for. He nodded, grateful that memory could wear an apron and pour comfort. Steam curled over the mug while he opened the newspaper and traced the crossword's empty squares. "Peace is loud enough to hear when pride gets quiet," he murmured, penciling in one clean answer and letting the rest arrive when they were ready. He made no large purchases. A pair of walking shoes replaced worn ones, a new garden hose coiled neatly by the spigot, fresh bulbs for the hallway lamp. He chose time. At the public library, he traded a cracked card for a new one and felt the small ceremony of renewal when the date stamp came down. The thunk echoed across a quiet that felt like sanctuary. He checked out a book of appellate arguments and a slim novel Margaret once loved and tucked both into his bag for the patient walk home. In the afternoon, he walked the neighbor's dog while the kids inside practiced a piano piece with 2 hesitant hands. The dog tugged toward fallen jacaranda blossoms that turned the sidewalk into a bright mistake. Elden laughed and gave the leash a little slack, then reeled it back when a cyclist chimed past. The city felt human again, scaled to conversation. He waved to a couple untangling string lights over a small patio, and they waved back as if they knew him from somewhere kind and ordinary. The mentoring call happened on a Tuesday evening. A young public defender named Maya sat at his dining table with a legal pad and a nervous pen. He listened to her outline and did not interrupt. When she finished, he asked for the question under the questions. She thought, then said it aloud, and the case found its line. He showed her how to thread it through the record without raising her voice, how to trust a pause, how to look at a judge without searching for approval or permission, only clarity. At night, he walked the hallway and adjusted frames. One held Kristen at 10 in a softball helmet too big. One held Margaret in the yard with a hose arcing sunlight. One held the 3 of them in front of a cheap motel on a road trip they still laughed about. The house offered its gentle creaks. He stood in the doorway, with the feeling that rooms can forgive if you let them keep your breath for a moment and resist the old urge to explain what does not need explaining. Voicemails from Martin arrived without warning, spaced like someone trying to find a rhythm he never had. The first offered explanations, the second rehearsed regret. The third asked for a conversation so he could apologize properly. Elden let them stack and then deleted them. The principle was simple. If your apology requires an audience, you have not found its center. He corrected no rumors, posted nothing, and answered no invitations to discuss the scene. Some apologies arrive as silence. Silence holds. A single text from Kristen came just after 11 on a Thursday. Brunch soon. Dad, with a heart that matched the red of the rose outside the window. He stared at the line until the room steadied, then typed back, name the place, and the hour. He set the phone on the counter and stepped onto the porch where the new paint had cured to a quiet sheen and the rail no longer wobbled when he leaned. Peace returned in small balances, the kind you notice only when the noise steps aside. At home, the afternoon settled into an easy stretch. He paid 2 bills, watered basil in a clay pot, and wrote a postcard to Aunt Martha in Ohio, who always mailed birthday cards 4 days early. He told her the roses were a good year, that the house stayed modest and true, that he would visit when the docket caught its breath. He slid the card into the outgoing stack and wiped a ring of dried coffee from the counter. A small circle undone with one clean swipe and no commentary. Evening gathered under the patio's new bulbs. He clicked them on and watched warm light pool over the table and the repaired rail, over potted herbs and the chair Margaret favored. A breeze moved the leaves and carried a small bell from down the block. He sat with a glass of water and listened for the city's softer voice. No messages, no rehearsals, no verdicts. Just the steady work of a life resuming. He breathed evenly. The evening came soft, with a breeze that carried the faint smell of rosemary from the garden and the distant sound of a neighbor's wind chime. Elden had strung lights across the backyard, simple strands he had used every summer since Margaret found them on sale at the hardware store years ago. They swayed gently overhead, casting a golden glow over the small table set for 6. The plates were mismatched but clean, the napkins folded with care, and the food was hearty and honest. Roast chicken, a bowl of potatoes, a salad bright with garden tomatoes. It was not the grandeur of a ballroom, but it was what felt right. Walter, his old colleague from the courthouse, leaned back in his chair telling a quiet story about their early years on the bench. A couple of neighbors joined in with laughter. Elena Vasquez set her glass down with the soft ring of crystal, and the circle felt easy. On a side table, next to a framed photograph of Margaret smiling in the garden, sat a card in a simple wooden frame. It was handwritten by a clerk Elden had mentored long ago, a thank you that spoke of patience, guidance, and belief when it was needed most. He kept it there as a reminder that legacies were measured less by titles and more by the people carried forward. The card's ink had faded slightly with time, but the words had not lost their weight. They seemed to belong in the same frame as Margaret's photograph, side by side, both pieces of a life rooted in giving rather than taking. As the sun slipped low, the gate clicked open. Kristen stepped in quietly, wearing street clothes, no trace of wedding finery or careful makeup. She looked like herself, not a role she had been asked to play. Her eyes searched the table until they found her father's, and then she crossed the grass in a straight line. Elden rose, and the hug that followed lasted longer than words would have. Managed. It was not dramatic, not loud, but it carried all the honesty of a daughter who had chosen clarity over pretense. When she pulled back, she gave him a small, tired smile and whispered, "I'm okay." He nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face, answering with the kind of steady presence that meant more than any declaration. Dinner moved gently around them. Walter cracked another story. Elena offered a toast, not grand but heartfelt, to steady ground and quiet strength. The neighbors chimed in with the kind of warmth that did not need rehearsing. Kristen listened more than she spoke, her fork moving slowly, her eyes settling often on her father, as if grounding herself in his presence. It was not the evening she had imagined weeks ago, but it was one that gave her something different, a place to breathe without judgment. Later, as plates emptied and the sky deepened into night, Elden reached for a small leather notebook that rested on the table beside him. He closed it gently and set it aside, not to consult, but to mark the moment. He looked around the table, then at Kristen, and spoke words that had lived with him for years, but only now found their place. "Love shows up," he said simply, his voice steady. "Respect is a verb. And when truth knocks, I open the door." The phrases landed with quiet finality, not as rules but as a credo. Kristen's eyes brimmed, and she whispered them back, as if to commit them to memory. The group fell into silence, the kind of silence that means something is being honored. The evening wound down with soft laughter, forks tapping gently against plates, and the rustle of leaves overhead. The navy jacket Elden had worn at the wedding sat draped over the back of his chair. Tonight, it was not armor, not a statement, not a battleground. It was only cloth, ordinary and honest. Kristen reached across the table to squeeze his hand, and he held it with the calm certainty that whatever came next, dignity had already shaped the path. When the guests left and the lights glowed softly against the night sky, Elden walked inside and set a book on the desk in his study. Between its pages, as a quiet marker, he slid a place card that read VIP. He had carried it from the hotel without fanfare, tucked it into his pocket after the crowd had thinned. Now it would serve as a bookmark, not a boast. Both labels were true in their time: father, guest, judge, VIP. But now they were past. The book closed and the night settled into its rhythm. What remained was not the noise of conflict, but the steady presence of values lived without needing to be announced. If this story gave you clarity, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from right now. Have you ever chosen truth over comfort, even when it risked upsetting those around you? What boundary protected your peace, and how did it change your relationships? Your story might give someone else the courage they need today. Elden's journey shows us that dignity does not raise its voice, it simply stands its ground. Respect is not purchased, and peace is not handed out like favors. It is chosen through clarity. Next, we are bringing you a holiday story where an inheritance dinner becomes an honesty test, and the quietest person at the table ends up changing everything. Tap the box when it appears, explore the playlist for more family betrayal stories, and share this video with someone who deserves permission to hold their boundary and protect their dignity.